The last redoubt of man is 7 miles high and topped with a tower, wherein sits the monstruockans, studiers of the monsters which siege man. Below them are the upper terraces, the air vents, and the great elevator, and 1,000 other machines necessary for human life. 1,000 cities spread below the monstruockans' tower within the pyramid's walls. And what's more, the last few powerful engines of war, the guns that fire pure earth current energy, stand watching, though everyone prays they are never used, for they'll draw worse than what they conquer. The millions of mankind living within the pyramid live in the altitude that best suits them. Many are beginning to diverge, so that those in high towers have developed greater chests and lung capacity than their lower brothers. There are terraces and watching posts that allow those brave enough to stare out into the night lands a view, though the peril is great if they are noticed. The vile mental energies, though dulled by the mighty air clock that encircles the base of the pyramid, can still reach out and whisper to the sensitive. The base holds what gates the last redoubt needs, so that the brave may go out into the night. They are opened quietly, without fanfare. There is no need to warn the denizens of the outer dark that there is a man about in the night. Circumnavigating the pyramid is the white circle, a small tube that produces the air clog. No monster or denizen of the nightland may cross it. Below the soil, the armored shell, like a plug in a wash drain, widens and plunges downwards 100 miles. Here are the fields and parks of the last redoubt, as well as the tombs and remembrance places. Because of the dreadful spiritual attacks, there is no farm animal greater than a bee, not even a dog. They were perverted and turned into a threat long ago, and can no longer be allowed to exist within the walls. At the very bottom flows the earth current. It is the last source of their power, the one thing keeping the last redoubt from the clutches of the destroyers. It flows from a crack in the earth, and it is harnessed for nearly everything they need. Even their dead are lowered into it, and it will not fail until the near end of all man until near on the end of all mankind, 25 million years hence, almost to the day that I record this. The second story is The Cry of the Night Hounds. In this one, Polynices goes out into the night and returns, having tamed the vile and vicious wolfhounds, night hounds, who have tails like scorpions, as well as jaws and armor that can tear apart men. He tamed them, or so he thinks, and brings them into the last redoubt, which is a most terrible offense to their laws. There, Creon, his uncle, kills the castellan, his brother, and takes over, throwing Polynices back out into the nightlands. The main character, Antigone, discovers her brother has been slain after living in the nightlands for 6 months. She abandons all and adventures out to try and save him. For you see, no rot or decay has touched his body in all that time, and the discos, his weapon, which reacts to life force, turns ever so slowly, as if a spark of life barely hangs on. There is a chance he lives. After some adventures, she reaches him, and with the help of the female night hound Dracana, drags him back to the last redoubt. On the way, they are attacked by powerful denizens, which look like humped hills of shadows and tentacles. Antigone drags Dracana through the white circle. However, Dracana rears up, and Antigone strikes her throat before a word can be said. It is revealed that Dracana was pregnant. Draco, the male of the two Night Hounds, appears and carries Polynices' body the rest of the way into the last redoubt. Then he lets himself get slain. For Antigone's crimes and recklessness, she is banished to an empty city, forced to starve to death, but without the direct intervention of men. Her brother does not awaken despite his salvation, for he is dead for good. He is lowered into the earth current. But 60 years on, her brother returns in a new body, having been reincarnated until he could find her again. She is freed, made sane, for she had gone insane in the loneliness, and the plot is revealed. Dracana and Drago's loyalty to Polynices was manufactured by the greater evil powers, though Drago's became real. Creon, Antigone's uncle, used them to take the throne and give an excuse to slay Polynices' father, the Castellan, as I mentioned earlier. Over time, Dracana protected Polynices' dead body to lure Antigone, or anyone else really, out and then to let her back in. It was arranged that she would invite the greater powers on the other side. Drago became loyal to Polynices, and so that is why he interfered with the process. He allowed himself to die so that the last redoubt is not tempted to try taming the Night Hounds again. They were one word away from taking the last bastion of man. The evil powers. Like best friend love, sibling love is often maligned and corrupted in this modern day. It is a strong bond, and once broken, it is nearly impossible to make whole. In the Nightland, it is strong, in that Antigone can return with the body, but weak, as Polynices does not revive, as did Murdath for Andros in the original story, because she was lowered down into the casket. And when she reaches the earth current, she actually woke up and is brought back into the land of the living. What's more, the love of a hound to its master is also greatly self-sacrificing, akin to the lovers and blood relations, and in the end, true for Drago's case. He abandoned his dread masters for Polynices and allowed himself to be dragged back to allowed himself to die to serve his master one last time. However, it's not my favorite story at all. It is long and cumbersome. I'll actually probably read the least out of this one compared to all the other stories. And unlike Awake in the Nightland, the richness is somehow dulled. It feels it's not quite there. Like it's like sort of like if Awake in the Nightland's like sort of like how I'm rubbing my forehead right now. This is like this, except it's not actually rubbing my forehead, but it's making the same motions. It misses the mark, but not quite badly. The spirit of the story is okay. I'll actually read something from it. No pizza boxes. Don't fall over. It's New Year's Day, and I had pizza last night. It's like, I don't want them to fall over. Don't do it, guys. Let's see here. I do want to read from it, because there is some good spots. Let's see. Where is... There's a pretty good House of Silence sort of thing. I'll read. There we go. So we're going to talk about Dracana and Drago real quick. And let's see, if you could compare it to Helenor going out into the night. Keep that in mind when I read that in my previous video. Let's see here. So Drakena and Drago is attacking each other. And I and Antigone is about to strike in the fight. I extended the haft of my discos and spun the wheel. Actually, it's okay. It's good. No, actually, I'm gonna do a different one. I should have planned this out, but that's the problem with spur of the moment. Let's see here. Something talking about the Mistman, the Widow, the Obelisk. Actually, this is pretty creepy. Let's see here. Rested her great chin. The widow trailed her long segmented body down the slope and rested her great chin on a stone, not far from the base of the monument, which the Antigone has climbed up um, to escape her. Her worm-like arms ranged here and there across the great rocks and dells of this valley, poking and prodding into the smoke holes, seeking me. I noticed how oddly delicate her motions were. Once she sent one of her hands reaching up the side of the monolith, the fingers lightly tapping and touching here and there, trying to find me by feel. The hand passed close to me so that I could see the bristles growing from the thick hide of her hand, and I could smell the feet encrusting her long nails. But eventually the poison gas overcame her, and her head drooped down, and her leathery lids fell across her burning eyes. At the same time I felt a thrill underneath my hands. It was not as if the monument grew warmer, or stirred, or as if a sound came from it. I can hardly explain what it was, but the knowledge came upon me that the monument was alive, charged with monstrous awareness, as if all the crooked circular runes up and down the monolith-shaped shell had somehow become eyes, staring with inhuman awareness in all directions, but concentrating its terrible will on one. The huge body of the widow trembled slightly, and her skin seemed to press inward against her skull and bones. This valley was a trap of this monument, and the poison gasped its venom, and now it was drawing some sort of spiritual or ethereal nutriment, or, perhaps, pleasure only, from the vast bulk of the dying flesh below it. Quickly I climbed down. It was surely aware of me. I could feel a disturbance in the ether every time I stepped from one carving glyph from the next. Yet nothing acted to harm me. Except, of course, that I lowered myself back into the belt of poisonous air. As quickly as I could, I sought to climb the valley slopes and come out of the noxious gas. I could feel the watchful, patient thought pressure from the obelisk behind me. Let's see. I'm looking for a specific one. But that'll do fine. If you compare that to how the thing I read of Telemachus coming to the dead city surrounded by the Silent Ones, I think you'll understand better what I'm saying. It's kind of hard for me to really do it. There's a certain spirit. In this one, she stops and is cleaning out her hair at a pool, and she sees a doorway. A great troubling came upon me when I beheld it, for one the dreams I had suffered when in the valley of poison smoke was that I would descend into such a door as this, and it troubled me greatly to recognize certain outcrops and shapes in the rocks from my dream. At that moment I stared in horror at that great gap. The mighty voices of the home call sounded across the night. It is not sounded to save when danger is so near. It is not sounded save when danger is so near and so terrible that to give the monsters, half humans and unseen forces of the night knowledge that a child of man crept forth was held to be of no account. The black mist which hung above me parted, and I saw, coming from the north, the slowly turning wheel. Only the rim projected from the dark clouds around it, and the reddish light of the northern volcano splashed against it, making it visible to me. The hub of that huge wheel was still hidden in the cloud, and so I did not die when I looked up. I looked down and I noticed that I was standing very near the opening of the dark gap. My helmet was many yards from me, and the poisonous pomander which held my death in it was out of my grasp. I doubted I could sprint across the sandy floor of the crater and reach the helmet, before the slowly turning wheel descended the slope of the crater. To slay myself with my weapon rod would be difficult, since the spirits that dwell in such weapons are protective of the lives to which they are attuned. Instead I ran, even as my dream foretold, into the doorway in the rock wall. And she describes some things, including a weird spot where she talks about her period, and that's how she could tell time. Which, very strange detail. Like, I dig it, and I don't know whether it was humorous or not. I'll talk about it more. But there's a certain thing in the prose that I feel didn't quite have the muse. Pardon me. Didn't quite have the muse like, say, Awake in the Nightland or even Silence of the Night had. Silence of the Night is probably the worst or second worst of the four, but again, like, we're complaining about a 7 compared to 9s, so just keep that in mind. I'll never actually review like a 5. The story is long and cumbersome. Unlike Awake in the Nightland, the richness of the wording and the grammar and just the tone, the beats, the descriptions is somehow dulled. While a different voice, because the main character is a woman who's telling this story, and she does sound like a woman and not just a man in a dress with breasts. Excuse me. Like, which is good. Like, that's not a hurtful thing on it. But while a different voice can explain it, it's really the devil in the details kind of thing. The story is expansive, and where John C. Wright would give us the fancy descriptions of all of Telemaco's living quarters, study habits, etc., we get politics here, as well as weird stuff about the people, but don't worry about it. And let me be very clear. Politics is never the point of the Nightland. Ever. Human versus human fighting weakens the concept of the story, which is about humans versus the inexorable night. The night that sieges them, the night that sieges everyone. There we go. It is even called out within the tale. However, it doesn't make it a bad story, of course. It's just not what allows the logic of the world to hold up. It's a good Nightland story is about a man or a woman, I guess, going out into the night and doing some deed, and there's some sort of love theme, and then they come back or they fail tragically. Whenever mankind as a whole is demonstrated in the main story and Awake in the Nightland, or they are unified, or nearly so, enough to squint at it. There's always some idiots running around who get killed to show off the evil of the night. Not that you have to do that in every story, but it happens more than people would like to admit. When the athletes and youths rush out to the aid of Helenor or Murdath, they are rebuked, but no one wishes them harm. There is very little human on human harm. That's what I'm trying to say. They want them to return, to be chastised and restored into the communion of mankind. It is nearly a punishment, and a cruel one, what they do to Antigone and what they do to the Castellan and others. What's more, the Monstruacan's internal politics is great for a gag, but the bicameral literalism versus the unicameral of that is presented during a rather serious conversation, actually. That is there one or two silent ones who are in the door of the House of Silence? Because we can only see one, and somebody once said that he saw it nod as if to another one, but everyone killed themselves afterwards because of some terrible madness. So we don't know, like that's how it's kind of presented, and it's very strange. Um, she's this is part of her sentencing I mentioned earlier. She's doomed to die a slow death of starvation, and that while like I did find it humorous. I do follow religious things, and arguing about the filioque and other things sometimes does get me, get my funny bone, but it's not what this story is. It's a long drawn out tragedy, and it's very sonorous and slow, and it wants to be a very thoughtful thing, but it doesn't. Unless, of course, it was meant in deadly serious, in which case it doesn't really need to exist, in my opinion. It's not something that I would think about too much, unless like it's one of those things. If is it to lighten it, or is it actually serious? Like the story's old enough that I don't really expect an answer, but it's like these two things combined it make it the longest of the stories, and certainly the longest feeling story, which is worse. The core of the story is excellent. I got no problem with any of the things that happen in it, but I do fault its execution. I would think. So I'm gonna talk about how I do things. So if there's a story that I think is worth it, but I think that the author takes missteps in certain places that could make it an objectively worse or better. I'm going to, instead of like saying this is bad, this is bad, this is bad, I'm going to say here's how we could probably do it differently, and in which case create a much better product that everyone can enjoy. I'm not trying to create, the product in my image, though technically that is, but it's more of criticizing with the mechanics that make it better, or hopefully make it better. So, along with keeping the same things in spirit, that's important. At no point in time am I changing the themes, the spirit, or the major beats of the story. Just trying to do my best. So in this case, we keep the two siblings as the Castellan kids, and have only a moment with Creon to establish his motives. Then, with a more linear narrative voice, because the author does skip around a bit, closer to the Wake in the Night, but focused as it is, but as focused as Awake in the Nightlands is as well. Uh, but also on the more feminine perspective. I think that's just a weird thing. I think I wrote this at like 3 a.m. Take out much of the build up for her going out, as well as her interaction with Haemon, which just kind of loads up the sorrow. Like he kills himself, and it's like why, like why, it's a bit much for me. Or add in Haemon and have very little or no Creon, or have Creon work through Haemon. Like we don't need to change the events that happen. We just need less of the politics, you know, including and not even have like him choosing death. Like he could, like I dig it. Like it's not against the Nightland, but it's also very strange for the spirit of the story overall. Um, any buildup that's needed can be mentioned as asides and not distract from the fact that Antigone is going out to save her brother. We can have a few lines where she's like, yeah, we were with Haemon and stuff like that. We saw Dracaena kill a mistman, and Haemon helped me take some pictures. That's it. Like we don't need, like, not like literally like that, but there's a very long period where she's not very long, but there's several paragraphs devoted to her looking at it, and then there's several more paragraphs at a separate location about her taking the picture, and about like how her shame inside the court is great because she has to carry her own stool, and it's like no, her adventures don't need to change. I don't feel that there is a need for the Monster Walk-ins in this story as it is. The ending is fine without the Master Monster Walken, actually. If Haemon is favored, it can be used to give Creon character through the loss of his son if you decide to let him kill himself. Or maybe he dies in the attack, who knows? It's one of those things. We don't need to overload the reader with characters. Um, there are double-digit characters named in the story, which is unusual for a Nightlands story, except for Last of All Sons, but that's okay. It's actually not double-digit characters. Spoilers. Um, but we're already dedicating a lot of space to the terrors of the Nightlands. We should remember the names of the Northwest Watching Thing, the Laughing Thing, or the creature from which comes great laughter, the Silent Ones, and so on and so forth. We don't need to know the people. The people are actually very unimportant. I don't actually remember Andros' name from the original story. He's the main character of the first Nightlands book, but I don't remember his name until it's mentioned by this book. But I don't really have a lot of people I can talk to about the Nightlands in my personal life. That's in St. Louis, so. And so the ending is fine. The ending with Drago is fine. But essentially, I'm asking a lot of fat to be trimmed, and the Haemon plotline to be slimmed down, and Haemon Creon plotlines to be slimmed down. Because again, we could build that part of it, and it might be interesting to some people, but to me, it's not the spirit of the Nightlands. It's not the spirit of what William Hope Hodgson created. So the resort streamlined, more memorable, and it keeps with the same spirit of the story. While it's the least favorite of the four, it's the false fault of the focus of the world building and the surplus of characters and ideas. A good Nightland story is about going out. It is not about the end of the last readout. There are masses, there are hour slips, there are mobs, and people go out and people have loves and stuff like that. And legends can be had. But the politics cannot carry a story. I'll eventually do stroke the chest hair. I'll eventually do a story on the book called Anima, which is fell flat in my eyes. I bought it, but it's like, ugh. And I'll do another video on that in the far future. Consider the ways you can get out of the last readout. You can sneak out, in which case you're not prepared properly and are an easy target, or you are prepared. If you're prepared, part of the process is facing the horrors, the writings, and the other examples that the Monster Walkens keep, so that you're not unduly surprised by what is thrown at you, or even deterred from going out. Therefore, character development is actually relatively minimal. A boy child cannot go out and become a man. Andros of the original novel did not become a man. He was a man, and we recognize him as that by the end, because we know of the person who his dream is from, as well as we know that he is a very important citizen sort of person. You can do a hero's journey through the Nightland, certainly, but it's also one of those things where it's like there's no captured by goblins or abhumans or whatever. There's your soul's ripped out of your body and devoured by the devil, except it's worse almost, because the devil just wants to send you to hell, not make you cease existing. Though that might be a bit worse. It's not the spirit of it. The danger of the Nightland is not like Seafreak's dragon, which can be surprised and stabbed through the heart, though you can stab a lot of things, and they die. They come down as a slowly turning wheel, obliterating the very soul that sees it, or even if it's in its presence. The Nightland itself may be called a dragon, but it shines, coiled around the last redoubt, of course, but it shines when the main character is true to his character. They're out in the out. Therefore, the stories that focus on the inner last redoubt, the political drama and everything else seems very paltry and unimportant. Drama of the mind, or angst, are killers more than they are crowd pleasers for these books. At least, I hope so. I hope people don't care about them. It'd be weird. What's the point of it's okay, we're gonna have this beef tenderloin, but first like this top tier ribeye. But first you got to eat through these hooves. Or no, that's not right. But first you got to eat through this tripe. And it's like, no, I want that tenderloin. I'll eat through the tripe. I'm gonna hate it. I'm gonna complain about this tripe. I didn't have to eat it, but I really would rather eat that tenderloin filet ribeye. You know. But I'm getting distracted. What is important in this story is the story of the siblings and the love of the hounds. No Nightland story needs to be the same as the first or the original one, but they do need to have the same spirit. No one ever cares, or will ever care, about who rules the last redoubt. It will exist until the exact predicted minute it falls. Everyone cares whether or not love will win this one, or, like so many others, will it come to nothing and the Nightland will win. In this one, the Nightland won, but it took its sweet time getting there, and, in the end, even though life was lost, the main character is saved from her madness and brought into the embrace of men. Come back next week and watch me contradict myself. Almost, almost. Uh, I'll range you one more spot. I said I would. Let's see here. So here's actually a part of the scene where the monster Walkins talk, and it feels better. They're questioning her about her experiences, which they do to all travelers. They can't do too much with it because she's not the same sort of scholar warrior that the people who go out are, but they can do it. Let's see here. He made a note of that, nodding, and then he said, "The opinion is divided whether the dark powers acted to spare you that you might betray our pyramid to their plan, or whether one of those mysterious good powers was hovering near you, unseen, keeping the malignancy at bay. When you rode in the front of the Crowned Watcher, it beheld you. All our needles jumped, and the atmospheric microphones recorded a voice that sang a great song of beauty, coming from somewhere in the smoke clouds overhead. Perhaps there is something above those clouds which acted to hinder the Watcher." I said it was not a good power which persuaded Dracania to trick me to open the circle for her. It was her cunning. The night hounds are intelligent. I saw the sense in her behavior. I heard Drago speak. He shook his head. "Unlikely. Limophotos is a simpler explanation. Fasting delirium. Your mind strained to make sense of the throat noises when it meant nothing." "No, it was a message." "What did it say?" "The monster, I mean." "One word away." Or would it be more like "one word away"? What does that mean? I have had many nightmares about it. And finally the meaning became clear. Drago was saying that Dracana, invited over the boundary of the circle, was about to raise her mouth and call out an invitation to the black things. The physical barriers of our armor could not have stopped those greater powers, which are only partially in our continuum. It would have meant sudden, absolute, and instant annihilation of mankind. Death for us all, if she had spoken the proper word to open the circle. One word away. She was opening her mouth to speak when I cut her throat. I was expecting him to roll his eyes. How convenient that the madwoman who breached our gates just so happened to save us all. But he took the comment soberly. Let's see here. Very good. And then of course it's talking a little more about some heresy and stuff like that. It's like, and so like here's what I'm explaining. What I was talking about. The Master Monster Walken himself came down to interview me once. His was the shortest interview of all. Well, he said. Well, what? I said, wishing there was a more original way to phrase that question. You know what I wish to know. Ah, I nodded. I described the second figure standing behind a leaf of the door in the House of Silence, its hood turned toward the first figure. The second figure had its hand stretched out, palm inward, which is like, I guess like this, or like this, as if beckoning or entreating the first figure, but hanging oddly just above the tips of its fingers a pinpoint of colorless strange light, motionless, unflickering. I told him the binatorial theory is correct. He nodded. We will move the observation of Isis into the endorsed category. There was nothing more he wanted from me. Yeah, I don't, and he leaves. I don't know why. It's like, if I knew whether it was humorous or serious, like, I figure it's serious. I mean, I'm sorry, I figure it's humorous, but like I said, it's a very weird thing, and I can't really remember if they talk too much about it. But it's mentioned in the story. Actually, I don't. I don't feel like it's there. Okay, hold on, Master Watkins. Okay, she's talking to the Master Monster Watkins. And they're talking that he's probably dead, but she's like, no, he must live. So, like, it's not the two theories are not mentioned in their conversation. Now, it does mention that they had arguments after it, but like it's very out of place. I kind of hope that I'm kind of hoping it's just humor, but it's not humor. I'm not able to really do it. Okay. Yep. Sorry about the delay there, guys. This is my second review in a series about John C. Wright's Awake in the Nightlands. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you join me in the next one, which will be shorter. This is the Reading Rainbow Emperor. Out.